Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Chuck Todd over on NBC News. That yapping terrier, Chuck Todd, had this to say with his panel about national leadership.
We haven't mourned these deaths as a nation. This death toll is mind-boggling. Okay, every day, 2,500 Americans, and it's a number. The president has not led us in some sort of national mourning on this. Is not, we have so many families that can't be there to hug this loved one as they go. But he's not playing. We know that this isn't who he is, but boy, is it really apparent right now that we have no national leader to try to comfort the nation right now. If somebody just every night read the names of the dead, and some way of honoring them in some national way is, I think, something that a lot of Americans are yearning for anyway.
I mean, should we honor all the flu victims who died from influenza A and influenza B? Read off their names?
Well, to me...
I don't mean to sound insensitive, but, more people have died, folks, from the regular our flu than from COVID-19 at this point. And I am sorry for every life lost, but, every day in America, even before the 7,000 people in America would die every day from something.
Yeah, and, this is where the war metaphor is taken to the ridiculous extreme.
I use the war metaphor.
So those who succumb to COVID-19, they're tantamount to those who gave their lives in service to this country in a theater of battle. And those who survived were all what COVID-19 veterans or COVID-19 survivors, the way that we honor military veterans. Is that where we're going? See, to me, that's sort of sentimentalism and cheap criticism of the president. I mean, how many times does the guy have to say, one life is too many, and here's what we're trying to do? Do you want a Hallmark card from the President of the United States, or do you want somebody describing what we know to be true, the action we're taking based on that knowledge to protect public health, to protect economic health, and so on and so forth? Do you want your president, do you want any politician to be your consoler, or do you want him to be, or her to be in the person who is using their legal authority to advance your interests? And that's sort of where the relationship ends. That the left, frankly, is so wispy about politicians. And that sort of criticism is why it's so difficult, in my opinion, just my opinion, it's so difficult to have rational conversations, because it's so much easier to just be in the business of stoking fear, virtue signaling, and otherwise engaged in rank sentimentality like Chuck Todd. I think it's really, really disgraceful. People are going to say, "Oh, isn't Chuck Todd compassionate? He has such great empathy for his fellow man." Sentimentality is what leads to barbarism. When you disconnect reason from important discussions, life and death discussions, lives versus lives, both sides of this discussion, in health, economic health, physical health, economic health. And oh, by the way, if you could have rational discussions, then we could have more meaningful discussions too that would bring us closer together, like talking about life. Is life just biological existence, or is life more textured and richer than that? We can't have those conversations because people like Chuck Todd are the opinion leaders inside the Beltway. They're the voices who get amplified. But there are some who are grounded and helpful, and one of them is Bret Baier. He is the host of Fox News' Special Report, 5 p.m. Chicago time on the weekdays when he's not preempted by the task force briefings.
Yeah, but now he's joining the task force briefings.
Look, he's got to get some airtime. So if he has to, if the mountain has to go to Mohammed, then that's what's going to happen. He's also the #1 best-selling author of 3 Days at the Brink, FDR's Daring Gamble to Win World War II, his latest in the 3 Days series. Bret, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Sure. Good morning.
With respect to where we find ourselves, particularly with the reporting coming out of New York yesterday. Now, again, all the caveats about, because I haven't seen it, so I don't know, all the caveats about methodology and testing accuracy. But since so much emphasis is on New York State and New York City, the idea that 13.9% of New York residents could essentially have developed an immunity per their per that percentage being reported in this antibody testing, I mean, that dramatically reduces the lethality rate in New York State to about 0.5%, which is still significant. And you're still talking about a lot of lives lost. It's not something to dismiss, but it really changes our perspective on New York City and New York State. And if it's being changed there at the epicenter of the outbreak, then perhaps that should inform our perspective nationally.
Yeah, I think that there's a couple of things that we learned. One was that test, and we don't know really how many people had it and kind of shed it and now are immune to it. But the other thing we learned was that it happened much earlier than we thought. In California, the first autopsy goes back to February 6th, which means that person probably contracted it in early January, which means that it was somewhere around the San Francisco Bay Area for a long time, all the way back to the beginning of January. Well, if you take Washington State, where we thought the first infection was, and you go backwards, I mean, you're talking like December. Now, if that's the case, maybe that's why California's numbers are different than New York's numbers, is that the thing was out and about, and these people had some sort of, at least in pockets, herd immunity. There's a lot we don't know. I think to your last discussion, no one wants people to die.
Right.
No one wants the U.S. economy to be killed. There is a happy medium in finding between those two things somewhere where it meets the middle, and finding that and then developing policy about it has been really a challenge, not only for the lawmakers, but for obviously the media covering this thing. They go back in these look backs and forget where we were in February. The president closes down travel to China on January 31st. All these things are happening in February.
Yeah, we were at school, we were playing basketball games, we were, sports was on.
Including Chuck Todd moderating a Democratic debate.
Yes.
February 19th.
That's right.
In which COVID-19 or the virus or any pandemic question was never asked.
And so, I'm sorry to interrupt, but just on that point, there's a great piece this week by David Seminara in the Wall Street Journal. And then on March 15th, the last debate, Jake Tapper moderating between Biden and Bernie Sanders, where there was a lot of discussion of COVID. You had Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders kept referring to it as Ebola. Joe Biden was comparing it to H1N1, which he termed N1H1. And neither of them called for more social distancing. Neither of them had anything specific. May 15th, March 15th, that's 5 weeks ago. Neither one of them, the two leading candidates for the Democrat nomination, had anything specific to say about any topic we've been discussing for the last 5 weeks.
So, you go backwards, right? And could the administration have done different? Could the president have done different? Yes. And could he have talked about it differently? Yes. But I come from the place of, here's where we are. What is happening now? What's the news today? And once you get through the crisis, you can go back and do a deep dive into day by day. But we're still in the crisis. Now, sometimes the president, mentions some things that are, I don't know how they factor in. Like yesterday, he's talking about sunlight and bleach and who knows how that all factors
somehow.
In. Yeah, and so then everybody goes off on a tangent and says, the president's telling you to inject bleach into your body. Well, that's not what he said, but he does say some things that obviously raise eyebrows and cause him and the administration a lot of problems.
Right, but we have to make sure that besides listening to the scientists, he has got to listen to the economics, because in order, in our desire to save lives, we're destroying thousands of people's livelihoods, and we can't live like this forever.
That's true, and the economy is teetering. We're probably 3-4 weeks away from. That's why these states that even their inclination, the governor, is to stay closed, they're looking at ways to open because they realize that a nuclear bomb has gone off in their economy.
Just going back to the whole task force briefing yesterday. This is also the responsibility of the media, though. Yes, Trump's riffing on UV rays and disinfectants was unhelpful. But what Bill Bryan had to say from DHS was helpful. That was interesting.
Very helpful.
That was value-added knowledge. And fine. You want to take your opportunities to take shots at the president. Fine. He's a politician. He's got to take the shots. That just comes with the territory when you say stupid things. Too bad. But you should also amplify, value add for your viewers and readers, like you do, the valuable information that was provided by somebody who knows what they're talking about.
No, that's true, and it's a shame. Like some places choose to take the briefing and cut it off and move off of it once the president starts, taking questions. And there's a lot of valuable information that comes out through his doctors answering questions that illuminate the situation. Listen, everybody wants to know when this is going to end. I think they're trying to figure that out, but right now it's a federalist question. 50 states are going to make the decision.
Something else that I think has been underreported, be interested to get your perspective, and that is the extent to which the deaths are concentrated in long-term care facilities. London School of Economics report between 42 and 50% of the deaths from coronavirus in Italy, Spain, France, Ireland, Belgium linked to long-term care facilities for the elderly. There's other looks at this. In Norway, it's 65%. In this country, it's reported as more than 10,000 out of 50,000, so it's at 20% now. But there's some suggestions that it's much bigger than that. And some good journalism. ABC7 in New York, health inspectors cited roughly 75% of nursing homes nationwide for failing to have or follow a plan to prevent the spread of infectious diseases in the past 4 years between January 2016 and January 2020. The idea that this is not everybody has the same level of exposure and will face the same hangman's noose if they're infected. That's not the case, and that seems to be the tenor of a lot of the reporting. And again, these are moms and dads and grandpas, and I'm not dismissing their lives either as like acceptable loss, but I'm saying you have to speak to where the manifest weight of the carnage is occurring if you want to make thoughtful public policy.
Yeah, and I think you're hearing from the president and the doctors, Birx and Fauci and Redfield, that we've learned a lot through this process. Hopefully that's one of the lessons learned. And if a second wave of this virus comes, that we can change how we do it, that we can, shelter in place people who are vulnerable or the elderly and change the way those facilities deal with it. So that not only is there less death there, but really it allows the other people to go to work. And there's going to be a point, a teetering here, where people say it's worth the risk for me to get my business back up. And it's not going to be the same, but at least I can do something. Most people want to get back to work. They don't want to. They don't want to get the check. They want to get back to work.
I'm more concerned about going back to school in the fall, and I think a lot of parents have a lot of angst. Because of what we're hearing, it doesn't sound like we're going to go back to school when they say, well, 50 people or less can gather, and that's not school.
Yeah, that's a big question. They answer it differently every time. So I think they're going to have to monitor it. And if I had to guess, most states are going to look at June, and then there's going to be a summer kind of lull, and then we as a country have to figure out what's going to happen if it comes back in the fall.
and I don't want to get, pit you against John Roberts, get you guys in some kind of fight, but it was great to see you at the briefing, and hopefully we'll see you again. I mean, good, succinct questions that got actual interesting information that regular people would want to know if we could cut through some of the posterizing of Trump that's efforted by so much of the rest of the press corps. He's Bret Baier, Fox News anchor, #1 best-selling author of 3 Days at the Brink. That's FDR's Daring Gamble to Win World War II, the latest in Bret's 3 Days series. Bret, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
There's only one radio show in Chicago talking about today's biggest stories and telling you what they really mean. That show is this one, Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560.